This is the first of quarterly town halls you can expect to see from your Board of County Commissioners. I put these together for a reason, because I want you to be able to approach your county commissioners and ask questions about why they have policies on certain issues, why they vote the way they do, how things are working the way they are within the county, taxes, revenues, expenses, and things like that. Unfortunately, tonight, my contemporaries are not going to be here. One has scheduled surgery tomorrow, and the other presumably couldn't make it for other engagements. So in that respect, you're going to be stuck with me. Part of the reason, too, that I want you all to be able to ask questions for all the commissioners is because oftentimes, and what I've found, is that people ask commissioners questions at events, and those commissioners can pretty much say whatever they say, and there is not another commissioner there who can attest to that being the case. And so it's easy to make statements about different types of issues, but not necessarily provide all of the information or have a different point of view when a statement is made. My name is Bruce Matari, and as you know, I'm one of your county commissioners. So I just want to kind of talk about what to expect tonight. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what county commissioners do. What I've discovered is that a lot of people don't understand exactly what your county commissioners do and how they play an integral role in the overall structure of the county government, how it functions, how it operates, and also talk with you a little bit about some of the challenges that commissioners face, and open it up to questions and answer any questions that you have related to the job. I've been in this position now for 1 year and 4 months. And I very much appreciate the opportunity that you, this community, have given me to serve you as one of your county commissioners. So a lot of people don't realize that the Board of County Commissioners' primary function is to set the vision for the budget vision for the county, and then make sure that we see that vision come true. So last year was my first budget year. We set up for the fiscal year 2024 budget. And we set it up in such a way that we took care of employees, made sure the sheriff's office was properly funded, public defender, prosecutor's office, courts, clerk's office, and all the different departments in the county. And then it's our job to make sure that that money gets spent the way that we set it when we approve the fiscal year budget. So we have to work with all the different elected officials. We work with the sheriff, the prosecutor, the clerk, the coroner. Did you know that there's only one person in the county that can arrest the sheriff? Yes. Yeah, the coroner, believe it or not. That's the person who can arrest the sheriff. Nobody else can. The assessor, treasurer, and those are the different elected officials. Now, the Board of County, or the county commissioners, have 14 departments that report to the board itself. And those departments are the airport, the BOCC administration, the adult misdemeanor probation, grants, which we've actually restructured that department. So now it's transportation, FTA, Federal Transit Authority, CityLink bus, juvenile detention, juvenile probation, the public defender, building and grounds, solid waste, information technology, parks and waterways, community development, reprographics, which does all of our printing in the county, as well as veteran services. So we have 14 different department heads that actually report to each of the commissioners, or the board itself. And then what the commissioners do is they divide those 14 different departments, and so we have a liaison system. And so we work directly with those department heads to know what's going on, to bring things before the board. And so it's a fairly large administrative function to stay on top of that. And then as well, we have advisory boards. Some of you may have heard of them, planning and zoning. We have historic preservation. We have the aquifer protection board, the Board of Community Guardians, the Fair Board, noxious weeds, snowmobile, waterways, and natural resources. As well, we also work and have liaison arrangements with outside organizations. Some of those include the University of Idaho Extension Office, the Chamber of Commerce, and also Jobs Plus. If you've ever heard of them, they've been in the paper lately with respect to naming this area a tech zone that the government now will start, the federal government will start having incentives for businesses to move here and bring technology and aerospace jobs. Any questions so far? You guys are pretty easy, thank you. Some of the other functions that the Board of County Commissioners is involved with is Board of Equalization. One of the things that's very challenging is to understand how your property taxes are developed or determined. Most people who are not from this area, their only frame of reference is what they knew from the communities that they moved from. And quite often, people associated that when your property value doubled in value, your property taxes doubled, and that's not the case. Your property taxes are limited by how much we can increase our budget, and we can only increase our budget a certain amount and increase the levy 3% total. So your property could actually double in value, and in a weird way in this county, depending on what's happened, how much growth has occurred, your property taxes could actually go down a little bit. So it's very different. And Board of Equalization is one of those functions that the Board of County Commissioners performs to make sure that your property is correctly valued among all the other properties within the county. And so sometimes people might contest that valuation, and it comes before the board. We work with the assessor's office, and we make a determination whether or not the assessor was correct or not when it comes to determining the value of your property. State law requires that the assessor be accurate between 90 and 110% of the actual value of your home. So that's how that kind of works. Other places that we focus on is budgeting. Especially when it comes to where the revenues come from. People are often surprised to discover that the revenues that are generated from property taxes only equal about 50% of our budget. The FY24 budget is approximately $110 million. That does not include solid waste, which for the FY24 came in at about $30 million. That's on top of that. You have your own separate levy for solid waste on your tax bill. And so therefore, because of that, I'm not really going to include that in the total budget. If you wanted to, it would be $140 million. But it's really $110 for the county operations that we levy for. And about half of that comes from property taxes. The other half comes from sales tax, liquor tax, sales, and grants and some other miscellaneous revenues. One of the things that people don't understand very much is that with property taxes, you have a very stable revenue stream that comes in. But what makes it less stable is the money that comes from the state. And that's usually sales tax driven. Well, sales tax is usually a function of the economy. If the economy is doing really well, sales tax numbers come in much better. If the economy has a downturn, then the sales tax revenues will not be as good, and we have to manage the budget effectively that way. And so that makes one of the challenges with having a county budget is that your property taxes only account for about half of the total revenues. And on top of that, believe it or not, about 2/3 of the expenses that the county incurs goes towards public safety. Public safety is one of the most expensive functions within county government. And many of these functions are state mandated, primarily the jail, the prosecutor's office, the courts, things like that. They have to be funded. So your property taxes alone don't cover the expense of public safety. We have to get that money from other places. Another source of revenue are fees. We are allowed to charge fees for the cost of services. So when you go in to get your title, registration, there's fees associated with that. That fee is to cover the cost of services for providing that. Community development has fees for building permits and so forth. And so one of the functions as a county commissioner is to make sure that those fees are set in accordance with what state law allows. And we can charge fees up to the point of what the cost of those services are. If we charge a fee that's below that cost, your property taxes are subsidizing that department. And so what we did last year was we recalculated our fees in community development, where the building permits are issued, and increased them to equal the cost of what that department is to the county. And believe it or not, the year before, it came in approximately right around, excuse me, $1 million short on the fees, which meant that the county was subsidizing that department. We recalculated those fees, and they increased as much as 40% on some of the services. But I wanted to do that personally as one of your commissioners because I don't believe that homeowners should be subsidizing departments that fees should be paying for. A fee-for-service type department is something that you should pay for that service and not rely on the homeowners to subsidize that service. And so that's part of the reason that we did that. In a perfect world, believe it or not, I wish that we could charge like a visitor fee, like a resort tax. There is a statute on the books that precludes jurisdictions from charging a resort tax if you have more than 10,000 people in a community. Now, sadly, most of the people who use the Kootenai County Bed and Breakfast, also known as our jail, are not from this area. And so the homeowner is often the one that has to subsidize the jail for people who don't live in this community. So it would be nice if there was a way that we could do that. I've talked with some legislators. That's one of the other functions of a county commissioner, is to work with our state legislators to help pass legislation that can make the lives of the counties and even the cities a little easier when it comes to how we generate revenue, especially, and how we work together. And so one of the things that would be nice is if we could amend the current statute. I would prefer that it be just 3 zeros instead of it being 10,000 people, any community below 10 million people. And that would allow the counties and the cities to impose like a resort tax. Las Vegas does it. A number of other resort type communities do that. And it would help pay for some of these services that by law we must provide. And so in a perfect world, I think that we should have visitor fees. The next one is user fees, like I talked about. And I believe that those fees should be the maximum allowable by law so that the user actually pays for the cost of that service that's incurred for performing that service, and that the homeowners are last when it comes to looking at them for revenues to perform basic county functions. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
What does a visitor fee look like?
It could be $1 a night on a hotel or an Airbnb or something like that, where you're visiting, and it's just a little extra fee that goes to cover the revenues in lieu of tax revenues to cover county services.
Hotel would collect it and then they turn it into somebody.
Yes.
Well, it's a vagrancy tax.
Hold on, we're gonna get a microphone so that way you can be heard on the video here. Go ahead, Sarah.
So, like, when we go to different places, there's a vagrancy tax. We don't have that.
Vagrancy tax? I'm not sure I would call it a vagrancy tax as much as I would call
Listed
it
as hotels if you go to
well,
Arizona.
that's probably just a colorful way in another community to list a tax. But I think it would be better served just to say a visitor or, some sort of a resort type, tax. Any other questions? We have a gentleman in the back there.
Did you say that there's a cap on property taxes that go up every year?
It's 3%. The question is there a cap as to how much we can increase the property taxes? That's 3%. State law also allows us to go back into foregone taxes, and I'll explain that, and that's up to 1% per year. So for example, if we only raise taxes 2% and we're allowed to raise it 3%, and I believe this is the way it works, 1% actually goes into the foregone category. So that if we had to in a future point in time, we could actually go back and recapture that 1% if we needed to. Now, obviously, that's something that we don't ever want to have to do, but it is something there in case it needs to be done. And one of the primary functions of the county commissioner that a lot of people I don't think realize is that it's our job to make sure that the county is properly funded to perform the services that the state requires us to perform. And part of those services is having a jail that can handle inmates, a court system, a prosecutor's office, and so forth, including DMV, also driver's licenses and things like that. There have been other counties in the past that did not properly fund these services. And if they're not properly funded, they will degrade over time. And in order to rebuild departments that have degraded over time, it's actually more expensive in the long run because you've lost some of your best people. And in order to rehire people, you're going to have to increase the pay. And then you're going to have to rebuild that experience that you had but lost because people didn't stick around. And that's especially important in law enforcement. One of the things that happened in the FY24 budget that a lot of people may not have been aware of is that before this year's budget that we passed in August, before that occurred, a sheriff's deputy on patrol would start off at $11,000 behind a Coeur d'Alene police officer. After 5 years, they would be $22,000 behind. Yes. Well, if you're a young person starting a family, $22,000 income difference is enough for an extra $100,000 in mortgage that you could afford to buy a house in this community. And so we did the analysis, the sheriff and myself, and what we discovered was that over the 7-year period between 2010 and 2017, we had hired 62 patrol deputies. 33 of them quit before 5 years. Now, it costs you, the taxpayer, $106,000 to recruit and train a deputy up to the point that they're signed off with their field training officer. That means they can drive a patrol car alone, but that does not mean that they are fully experienced. That takes about 5 years. By the time you're signed off with your field training officer, you've got about a year, maybe a little bit more or a little bit less depending on your training of experience. So when you look at the 33 people that left between that 7-year period, that was about $3.5 million of your tax money that literally evaporated, and another jurisdiction got the benefit of that when that deputy left the county and went to Coeur d'Alene Police or Spokane. And so it's very important that we try to retain our officers who are building experience, because another thing with an experienced officer or deputy is the fact that your liability from a county perspective goes down. You have people who understand how to deal with different situations. They're experienced. You can avoid those rookie-type mistakes, as they say, which often can be very expensive on settlements. And that's another function of a county commissioner, is to help mitigate liability so that you, the taxpayer, aren't forced to have to pay things or pay for things because we didn't have properly funded departments with the right kind of staff and the right kind of experience to make good decisions. And so that's another function of a county commissioner. And then the final one, which is fairly significant, is land use, zoning, conditional use permits, which include items like cell towers, certain types of developments that may go outside of what is already established in our comp plan. And so we deal with those kinds of decisions as well. And those are the main functions of your county commissioners. Yes, sir. Hold on. There's a woman in the back, and then we'll have Sarah come up to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
You mentioned that there was federal funding coming in for some high-tech, to develop high-tech jobs or something like that.
What they designated this area so that there's an incentive for them to come over here. It's just a designation that the federal government made. Now, as far as federal funding goes, we do accept federal grants. One of the things as your county commissioner, when accepting federal grants, is that you have to make sure that you understand the strings, if there are any strings, associated with that federal money. The two big places that we accept federal money is the airport through the FAA, and then the CityLink bus through the Federal Transit Administration. That's all largely subsidized by the federal government, most of it. The airport gets millions of dollars from the FAA for improvements and maintenance, but mostly improvements, and one of the more recent ones, of course, is just upgrading the runways. And we're even looking at the possibility of an air traffic control tower. And before anyone goes any further with their thought process here, I want to be very clear. An air traffic control tower will not bring more traffic here. It's actually, there is more traffic here that often than Spokane International Airport or Boise Airport, especially in the summertime. It's a safety issue. It is not to bring more people. We actually really need an air traffic control tower because we have so much traffic that we need it to be properly monitored and regulated around the airport. It also has the ability to reduce noise because once an airplane gets close by, they'll be instructed to fly a certain flight path, and so they just won't be flying over any neighborhood. It'll generally try to get them to fly much further away so that you can avoid the residential neighborhoods. Sarah, the gentleman up here in the green on your right has a question.
How much foregone tax is available? Assuming the last year or two we've used the 3%, how far back can we go, and then how much would be available?
I'm going to take a guess here, but I think it's around 8%, plus or minus. I think it's about that much. No? Is it a little more up?
How much is available?
Yeah.
I think it's around 11 million, but there's limitations of what you can take each year. You can do 1% for operation
Yeah, but as a percentage, it's about 8%.
of the budget.
Yeah, for the foregone. Or it's 11 million, so however we get to that percentage.
Of what you can take each year, is that?
Yeah, 1% of,
1% of what you can levy, what you're levying for property tax. So I think it estimates about a little over 500,000, is that 1% for operating ongoing costs. And then you can do 3% for capital projects, but once those capital projects are done, it's retired and that money is no longer available.
okay, so it's about 5.5% then probably, if it's 11 million.
So you can only take 1% per year. But
Yes.
if it's 8%, there's the possibility that the county could tax 4% for the next 8 years.
The possibility would be more like next 5 years. Yeah, because it's a dollar amount. The amount that's available is 11 million. So however we get to there till that 11 million is consumed, it'd be that many years.
It's been brought up on the campaign for some of the other the commissioners running, kind of the threat of the county being able to use foregone taxes. So,
Yeah.
but it hasn't been stated what that dollar amount would be or how long it could last and stuff.
Yeah, I don't see that being an issue today unless something completely unexpected happens. I just don't see that being an issue at this point in time. So, no, is there another question? Yes.
Hi, two questions. One is, are boat slips taxed? And if not, is that a possible revenue source? Second question is about tech companies you're trying to attract
Well,
to Coeur d'Alene. Is that, what specifically type of tech companies are you looking at?
Well, we're not looking at any tech companies specifically. So this was just a designation that the federal government supposed to have put in the inland Northwest. And but the airport is looking to attract businesses that that are involved in the aerospace industry, but do not increase traffic, air traffic, because those bring good jobs to the community, but they don't increase the amount of traffic or planes flying over. It's aviation oriented or technology, yes. So. Yeah, because you're on the water, I believe that the docks, you're referring to the docks. I think they are. I think they are taxed because you have the waterfront property as well. So, But that's a good question, and that's something that I can confirm for sure and let you know if you leave your name and email address.
Okay.
So,
Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions?
oh, the town hall?
Yeah, and then it got,
Yeah, that one kind of disappointed me, but I tell you, just sometimes, bad things happen. Our airport director had one of the worst stomach flus. And without him being there was really no way to hold a good town hall.
they're not gonna reschedule that?
Yes, I do want to reschedule that.
Yeah, I think it's important.
Yes. So it'll probably be this summer. Yeah, because that's one of the things that hasn't happened enough is engagement with the community, especially with our airport. The airport plays a significant role in this community. But as we've grown, the sprawl, the suburban sprawl, if you will, has gotten much closer to the airport. And there's a lot more traffic. There's a lot more jet traffic, especially. We have a lot of people, very wealthy people who have moved into this community, and they have their own jets. And so that does make a difference. Sometimes, yes. Now, the previous board was entertaining the idea of providing commercial service. Now, one of the things I would like to clarify, okay, is that there's two types of commercial service, okay? Our airport right now is set up to accept commercial service, but it's charter commercial service. The next level of commercial service, which is what is at Spokane International, is called scheduled commercial service. That's where you book your tickets well in advance and it's scheduled flights. I don't see that happening here. Yeah, I don't see that happening here. It's been tried, believe it or not, a couple of times before, and it didn't work out. It was not profitable. So, but that's something that I believe the community should have a lot of say in. And that was something that didn't happen the first go-around when they talked about commercial service. I felt it was a little bit like that statement with Nancy Pelosi on Obamacare. We need to sign it first and then figure out what's in it afterwards. I felt like they wanted to get the lease signed with the company to get the commercial service started, and then we'll figure out what it'll look like afterwards. And I don't see how that serves a community particularly well in that type of situation. So, any other questions at this point? Gentleman, okay, and then the gentleman
At
in
the
the
mic,
back afterward.
What are the steps to get an air traffic controller? What has to happen for the safety of all of the air traffic?
Well, our airport director is just a fantastic guy, and he's just on the ball. He's just one of those kind of people that, he's that good. When he gets into the position, just get out of the way and let him do his job. He's actually looking at developing a very, very inexpensive way. There's two ways. We either pay for it ourselves, or we wait for the FAA to give us a grant so that we can actually build a tower. And then the question is, who's going to fund the air traffic controllers? Well, our airport director has figured out a way where we can build a relatively inexpensive tower, and I mean very inexpensive, maybe in the $100,000-$200,000 range. It's not like a multi-million-dollar project. It might be a little bit more, but it would, and now, by the way, they have virtual towers. So you don't even have to have a tower where someone's overlooking the airfield. You can have cameras, and they sit in an office. Yes, I know. It's very different. It's a very different world we live in from many years ago. And so they can build this tower fairly inexpensively. They can man it for the busiest hours throughout the day. And you can make up that expense through the airport landing fees and other fees associated with it. Believe it or not, the county was subsidizing the airport not that long ago. The airport is now self-sufficient, so it no longer requires tax dollars, which is a good thing. And we want to keep it that way, but we also want it to be safe. And so there's always the balance between making these additional investments and maintaining safety, and we're definitely past that point. Gentleman in the back.
My question is about the resort tax.
Yes.
Have you looked at other communities that are of our size that collect a resort tax?
They don't. They don't, because the statute precludes you from collecting a resort tax if your community is greater than 10,000 people.
Oh, okay.
So
But that's not a realistic thing. You could,
not until we can get our legislators to add 3 zeros to the end of that 10,000.
oh, okay.
I'm all about it.
So if the legislature will approve it, then we could collect a resort tax.
If there's enough appetite down in Boise to do that, there's another piece of legislation I'd really like to see them pass, and that has to do with the sheriff seeking reimbursement from incorporated cities that do not have their own police departments or a contract with the sheriff's office. You know, what a lot of people don't realize is that when the county has a growth plan. It's called our comprehensive plan, the comp plan, and that is what determines growth for each roughly decade. And I'm going to talk about growth a little bit too here. And so when you're a city and you incorporate, you actually are like a child who's now living on their own. The county has no say over what the cities can or cannot do. The cities they become their own taxing districts. They develop their own growth models. And one of the things that they often don't do is develop their own law enforcement. They shift that cost onto the county sheriff's office without the benefit of a contract. And so what you end up having happen is that they'll put big box retailers in. They'll add apartments. They'll add all of these things that draw resources. But they won't pay for the law enforcement. They don't have to. They cost shift that onto the county. So you as a county citizen, if you don't live, for example, in Athol, because that is one of the places, it's its own city. We don't have a contract yet with them, with the sheriff's office. So any calls for service up there, if they are related to the growth that's going on up there, which they're growing pretty well, the county taxpayer who doesn't live in Athol is helping to subsidize that. And I think it's only fair that we properly include the cost of growth in our growth-making decisions, because law enforcement and public safety is a cost that comes with growth. Because this community is growing more, by default, we need a bigger jail. We need more patrol officers or deputies. That's just a consequence of growth. And so one of the things that I think would be important, and I've talked with other sheriffs throughout the state and our association of counties, is the fact that, a lot of these cities, they kind of rely on the sheriff to provide law enforcement services. But it puts a stress on them when the cities are growing and that cost isn't being shared. And so that would be one of the pieces of legislation I'd like to see passed as well. Because I think it's only fair that we properly allocate the cost of growth to the revenues that you get from growth. And that's one of the benefits of being incorporated as a city, is that you no longer are subject to what the county says you can or cannot do with property. Is there another question?
The only thing is, you brought up the retention of law enforcement. I think that's a very important issue.
Yes, it is.
So we need to look at where we can get additional revenue to pay them enough to want to stay here and not leave after a great deal of training. One of my jobs was employee retention. And I know that's so important because it costs you so much if you lose an employee and you have to start over again and retrain them. And you brought up those numbers.
It's
Somewhere
extremely.
we have to get enough revenue to make sure our law enforcement, once we spend all that money training, they stay with us.
Well, and I think that's one of the functions of your county commissioner, is to explain that and to make it clear. A lot of times what happens is that the different elected officials and department heads will ask the commissioners, I need money to help solve these problems. And they do need the money. But the commissioners don't make the case enough to the public as to what's going on and why. Now, when I explain that a Coeur d'Alene police officer is making $11,000 more than a Kootenai County Sheriff's deputy on day one and $22,000 more after 5 years, people start to understand pretty easily that we're underpaying our deputies if we want to keep them and remain competitive. And this has been an issue that's been going on for years and years and years. a long time. And so until we actually can make the case to you, the public, as to what we're doing and why we're doing it, I think it's a fair bet that if you knew that it was going to cost 3% one year on your taxes, an increase, in order to properly fund our law enforcement officers, you would be amenable to that. Is there anyone here who's not amenable to that? Please raise your hand. No? And that's exactly what we did with our FY24 budget. We increased the property tax by 3%. It brought in about $2.5 million, and about 1.8, 1.9 went towards those patrol deputies exclusively. And we just ended up giving the jail deputies a raise recently, because that's another area. We've been down 30, as much as 40% in jail deputies in our jail. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't realize that the physical capacity of our jail is 450 inmates. The legal capacity is 350. Why? Because we don't have enough staff. So once you go past the legal, thank you for coming in. Once you go past the legal limit, you start to incur a liability for the taxpayer that I don't think is appropriate. So what we've had for our inmate population, believe it or not, has fluctuated from the high 300s to the right around 550. So we've been as much as 100 inmates past the physical capacity. The sheriff does not have the authority to release inmates. That means they sleep on the floor until they're either sentenced or picked up by Idaho Department of Corrections or released, whichever of those comes first. That's a huge liability. And that's one of the things that I've worked with our sheriff on, and I talk to him about this stuff because I don't know these things. And I know if I don't know them, you as the general public and citizens of this county probably don't know them unless you are in law enforcement. But one of the things that happens when people are sleeping on the floor and it's that crowded is that gang hierarchy starts to develop within your jail. That increases the danger for our jail deputies. If somebody gets hurt in our jail, that becomes an expense that you, the taxpayer, has to cover, especially if we have to take people to the hospital. So one of the best things that we can do is plan for our jail expansions to make sure that we don't have people who are sleeping on the floor for as long as they have been. And it's not happening now, but it has happened several times. And make sure that we have enough capacity to handle the inmate population as a result of the growth that has occurred in this community. And so that's what we're doing now is we've allocated money up to $9 million to complete an empty jail pod that was built about 5-6 years ago so we can increase our capacity. Now with that, we also have contracts. So we actually lost or had one of the contracts reduced. The federal government, believe it or not, the U.S. Marshal Service and Border Patrol will pay the county to house their inmates. So it is a source of revenue that we can use to help fund some of the deputy pay. And that was one of the main reasons that we increased the deputy pay recently, is because we discovered that the revenues that were coming in were significantly more than we budgeted, and that allowed us to increase their salaries. Now, hopefully we can start filling some of these slots and keeping these people so that we have good experience operating within our jails. And but that's, in essence, one of the ways that we can increase revenues so that we can put that money back into our sheriff's office, our law enforcement. Are there any other questions related to this or anything else?
If you do find a way to fund those deputies, is there any way in their contract that they could have to stay for a certain amount of years to make, so that we're not spending all that money to train them to go somewhere else?
Yeah.
We'll train them, but they have to agree to stay so long in our community before, so
it actually pays for itself.
Yeah, it's basically saying that, look, we're going to make an investment in you, and in exchange, we want you to stick around for a certain amount of time. And that's an excellent question and idea, and it's something that we've talked about. According to the attorneys, it's largely unenforceable. As an employer, we take a chance on a new hire, and we hope that they stick around. And one of the best ways to ensure that people stick around is to make sure that what we say we promise when hiring them, we actually do. One of the things that has occurred, and it's occurred in this room in public comment, deputies have been hired in the past and promised through a pay matrix. On certain years, this is how much you'll be making into the future. So in 3 years, you'll be making this much. At 5 years, you'll be making, a greater amount. In past boards, they did not fund those, what we call step increases. So when that 3 or 5 year period came up for that deputy, they didn't get the bump as they were promised. Now, for anyone who's ever been in the military, they have a matrix, a pay matrix that's called time and grade. How long have you been in a particular rank? And that's what you can expect to earn after a certain number of years. So I believe from an employee perspective, they're going to feel slighted that their employer made a promise to them and they didn't live up to it. Now, under extreme circumstances where the money's not there, that is something that I think people can understand. But I think for the community, from the community's perspective, if there's an opportunity to keep these people, and if it means a 1 or 2% increase on your property taxes, then we should do that to retain these people. Because when you make a promise to somebody and you don't fulfill that end of the bargain, how can you expect that person to stick around? And that's been one of the challenges. Now, this has happened in the past, and I'm going to do the best to make sure that that doesn't happen under at least any board that I'm a part of. But that's an excellent question.
To do like a sign-on bonus so that when they
We-
sign up, you're gonna get this much, but it's not paid right up front. It's
Yeah, the question is, can we do a sign-on bonus? And we do those. We do those. And, we had another situation. This is a department that's within the sheriff's office. It has to do with our 911 dispatch service. So these are the people that you would call that would answer the phone when you call 911. These are the people who would coordinate fire as well as law enforcement service calls if you were to call. This has been a problem for quite some time. They've always had vacancies. We have a 25-seat call center for that. For a 24/7 operation, we got down to 9 dispatchers. Now, the problem with these kinds of jobs, same thing with deputy jobs, law enforcement, is that when an employee resigns, it's not like an administrative job where the papers just pile up. You need bodies to fill those slots, so the remaining people have to fill those shifts. Well, what was originally a 40 to 50 hour a week job moves up to a 60 to 70 hour a week job. And that puts an immense amount of stress on an employee, especially if they're not getting enough rest. They're not having enough time with their family, enough downtime. And so what would happen is that if you're tired and you're taking a call, you can make a mistake. So we got down to 9 people. You know how we fixed that problem? We equaled the pay, equaled it to Spokane. Literally within the first week, we got 7 applications. They got 25 applications the previous 6 months. And these applications, you have to pass a background. We got 7 the first week, and 4 of them were laterals. One of them was from a person who had already worked there and left because of the pay. They got so many applications, they actually stopped accepting applications. But we also had to hire contractors, because it was getting so bad and people were working so many hours that the fatigue was too much. So we hired 2 contractors. And this is where it ends up costing you a lot more money when you start to get, and I just refer to it as being cheap. It's the high cost of being cheap. Those 2 contractors for 90 days cost $100,000. So almost 200,000 a year per agent from a contract basis. That's almost 3 times what we would normally pay an entry-level person if we equaled Spokane. And so that's how important it is that we stay on top of these things, because we can't be in a situation where you call 911 and you get a recording. You get a message that says, please call Monday morning when someone's here. That's not acceptable to me. But these are the kind of things that the public, I don't think, is aware of. And these are the challenges. These are the challenges that I've walked into, and this is what we're doing to fix that. And I think when people understand that, they're much more open to the idea of we need to do what we have to do to make sure that we have our public safety properly funded so that they're there for us when we need them.
Okay, you got those 7 applicants. How many positions have you actually filled?
It takes it's about 3 months for backgrounds. So, yeah. And we only did this back in December timeframe. So they have enough. Our goal is to get up to about 15 to 17 people in that department. And we should hit 15 no problem by the end of this year. Some of them are laterals, so the training time is much less. But that was one of the things, is that once your department starts to get so small and they're very highly trained positions, you can't just hire 20 people and put them in positions and you need to train them. And it takes another person to train. So if you only have 5 people who can train, that means you can only hire 5 people at a time, and that takes several months. And so we recognize that we can't build it back up that quickly, but we should be able to get up to 15 with the lateral transfers, especially those people who worked in that office before and left because of the pay, and now they're back. Yeah.
Commissioner Matari, you have a
Yes.
couple questions there, and if you still have a survey, raise your hand and I'll come by and grab it.
All right. Let's get to the juicy questions here. Why has the proposal of doing a family split been voted down so often in the past? Is there a way this could move forward? This is an issue that's before the board right now. I don't want to get too much into the details because we're really midstream with it. But it is something that conceptually, I think it's a great idea. But like all good ideas, like all headlines, the devil is in the details. And so it's really important that we make sure that whatever we end up agreeing to, and I'm not talking about this particular issue, but whatever issues are before the board, that we deliberate and we really think about the consequences of what we agree to. Because quite often there are many unintended consequences that we don't expect. And so it's very important to me that when we make a decision, it's well thought out, and that we don't allow for loopholes or ways for things to be abused later on that end up hurting this community, and it's not what you want. So it's something that I think the board will find a way to be favorable, but like I said, it's always the devil's in the details. So, next question. Explain what is going on about the fairground. Why is there talk about relocation? Okay, this is 2 questions, so I'll answer this one first. I've heard talk about the fairground for as long as I've been involved with running for office and being a county commissioner. I think at this point in time, it's real important that we kind of triage what's important in this community and what we have the money for and what we don't have the money for. The estimates that I've heard to actually relocate our fair to another location is upwards of $100 million or more. Now, I haven't seen actual numbers on that. These are estimates that I've heard for other communities that have looked at the same issue. I don't believe if it were to cost that much, that is necessarily a priority at this point in time. One of the things that I think is really important that we do as a county is properly plan for capital investments. It's one of the things that we haven't really done enough of, I believe. We've had this building for about 25 years. At some point, we're going to grow out of this building. And from what I can tell, we don't have a plan for what that next phase will look like. As you probably are aware of, we have a justice center that we're building right next to this building. We're going to add about 60,000 square feet of commercial space, just under that, and 3 courtrooms will be built inside there. There was never any plan to build this justice center until we got the ARPA money, which is the federal grant money that was kind of sprinkled throughout the country as a result of the COVID situation. If we didn't have that money come into this county, there would not be 3 more courtrooms getting built. Now, I've toured the courthouse, and we have some offices where there's multiple judges sitting inside the same office, and these are not big rooms. I think one of the offices is smaller than the room that Jonathan is in over there. And, you know, there's just not that much room, and the reason for that is because we haven't planned properly for the expansion of the campus. And believe me, the last person who wants to grow government is myself. But the fact is that as long as this community grows, the government will have to grow. It has to grow because there needs to be more people who will process driver's licenses, registrations, more patrol deputies, more jail space. That's the consequence of growth. More courtrooms, more prosecutors, more public defenders. So as far as the fairground goes, I don't see that being a possibility in the foreseeable future. The next question is, will the green space issue come back out? If so, will there be more information available about how it will be run? Is everyone in this room familiar with the open space bond issue that was on the ballot last November? Okay, some people are. I'll just recap it here. There was a ballot initiative. Let me stand back. In Idaho, you need 2/3 of a vote in order to take on debt. So the county cannot incur debt unless 2/3 of the community agrees to that. There was a ballot initiative, something on our ballot last November, excuse me, that where the county would be able to take on up to $50 million that it could only be used to buy open space, primarily on the prairie, and turn that land into parkland so that the public can use. It would never be developed. It got to just under 50% with absolutely zero marketing, which actually is not half bad. Sadly, the county cannot advocate for or against a particular initiative. The public funds can't be used for that. Private entities can. There really wasn't much of an opportunity to promote this bond, but what it would have done is help preserve some of the open space above our aquifer on the prairie. One of the things about open space, and I plan on kind of revisiting this subject because I don't think the community understands as well what open space can mean. One of the things that a lot of people look at is they go, well, you know, you're going to increase my taxes by taking on debt. That is true. However, the growth is going to increase your taxes a lot more. If we took on the full $50 million, the average home, about $650,000, no, $550,000, their taxes would go up about $40 a year. That's not much money when it comes to buying up land. Now, the difficult part or the sad part is that land is pretty expensive right now. So I'm not so sure how much, I could tell you how much 50 million would buy you. But what I can tell you is that with the open space and the parkland, there's other departments that tax you, like schools, roads, water districts, and so forth. Well, open space does not require additional classrooms. Open space does not require additional widening of roads because there's less density. So yes, you do pay a little bit more to buy that land if that bond were to pass. However, in the long run, I think you would discover that your taxes would be lower because we wouldn't need to fund all these other taxing districts for the services that they provide. If a large field is not developed into apartment buildings and single-family homes, you don't need more classrooms. You don't need more jail beds. You don't need those things. And all of that stuff costs money. One of the things that people don't realize is that growth does not effectively pay for itself in Idaho. For people who come from that small state down south near Mexico along the Pacific Ocean, they have this rule called Melo Ruse, I think, and it allows, it forces developers to pay for the infrastructure so that growth pays for itself. That's not here. We do have an impact fee, and I did read the statute, and I have to tell you, it is a wonderful piece of window dressing that appears to have been written by developers for developers. It's very difficult to develop the methodology that can withhold legal scrutiny to determine how much impact fee you can charge per unit. We have hired one consulting firm to give us the calculations for the jail bed fee. The number they came up with was $551 per unit. A unit is a housing unit. There's also an impact fee for commercial space. I write a blog post, and I wrote about, I did the math, that in order to generate enough impact fee for a $15 million jail expansion, we would need 18,000 more homes and 21 million square feet of commercial space. That equals about 105 supercenter Walmarts. Now, that's how much growth we would have to incur in order to generate just a fee to cover a $15 million expansion. Now, I can tell you a $15 million expansion is not very much because we're looking at between 8 and 10 million to complete an empty shell at the jail. Now, here's the kicker with this impact fee statute. If we don't spend that money within 8 years, we have to start giving it back. So that means we need 18,000 more homes and 21 million square feet of commercial space to be built in the county within 8 years to generate that $15 million. And so in effect, it's going to be very difficult to generate impact fee and actually use it, because projects like this don't happen in cycles smaller than 8 years. They tend to happen in cycles greater than 10. And so that's one of the challenges with our impact fee. I've talked with our legislators. I have begged and pleaded with them. Amend that statute, add a 1, better yet a 2 in front of the 8, and let us hold on to that money for 18 or 28 years so that we can actually deploy it and use it for capital projects so that the growth really does have an opportunity to pay for itself. But right now it doesn't. Sadly, you, the citizen, are the one who's tasked with paying for the growth here. And so that's another area that I'm working on with our legislators. Hopefully, they can amend that statute. Yes, sir.
Regarding the open space situation, which rightly so will end up coming around, the question is, I didn't see or hear much of anything regarding how much, if any, maintenance would go with that much open ground that you guys would absolve for the community.
Yeah, and that actually, I think, was a failure in the communication process. And if I could do it over, I would try to have drawings, renderings, try to have renderings of what that would look like. The idea was to have open space that was very inexpensive to maintain, not like a highly groomed golf course or something like that. Now, this was meant to be trails and just, open space, parkland, but not like I said, nice grass and where it has to be maintained and so forth. So.
And that was a big question on a lot of people's minds.
Yes.
What does the open space equate to?
Yes. So, and it's a good question, and obviously hindsight's always 20/20. As well as it kind of came before me early on in my term here last year, and it was just one of those things that I wish I had the foresight to think about that, beforehand, because I probably would have pushed for that a little bit more. But I do think that when people understand what the open space means and what it'll be used for exactly, they tend to be much more open to it. And as long as the document or the rules for it are written very strictly as far as what future boards can do, then the community can be confident that that money will be spent the way it's supposed to. So, good question. Yes.
In that northern Mexican state, they often required the developers to develop with the open spaces in mind, and so that whatever large tract of land they had, they could only build on, say, 60 or 75% of it, and then the rest of it had to be open space.
Yes.
Is that occurring now?
Not enough. One of the challenges is that we deal with a lot of smaller subdivisions. So when you have a 4 or 6 or 8 home subdivision, there's just not enough space to set aside for that. You really need those large developments where they can actually do that. I think Strawberry Fields up in Hayden, actually, that's a development that has a nice park right in the middle. And those are the kind of things that are great for the larger communities. But for the small ones, it's very hard. How do you do that? And that's part of the problem, is that there's a lot of small individual development going on throughout the county. And you really want to have a way that where you can kind of get in there and at least save some of these large parcels and preserve them, if you can. Yes?
This is just a hypothetical question, but does open space accelerate property values?
Well, supply and demand will accelerate your property values. Now, this is just my experience from where I grew up and where I came from. There was a period of time where the community was growing extremely fast, no different than here. And there was a great need for housing. And what they built was a lot of starter condos. And there was enough land to build starter condos for about 10 to 15 years. And that kept the price of those condos low. But as soon as that last piece of land was developed, the market took over and the price started to go up. So the question you have to decide is, do you want to have your property values go up if people really want to move here and they're relocating from other places, quite often selling their homes and then having cash to plop down on real estate up here? You have to ask yourself, what do you want this place to look like? Do you want it to be a bedroom community? Do you want it to be an apartment community? Do you want it to be some blend of that? What is that blend that you want it to be? Because that's going to ultimately determine the kind of community that you're living in. The open space, if anything, and I think it's important for us to think about the fact that it's nice to have places that you can go to and have some open space and to recreate. Now, the good news is that we do have a lot of space here. But it's not like you can just drive 5 minutes and get to that. So sometimes it's nice when you can get to a park and you can go take your dogs out, or you can go ride your bike or ride your motorcycles or something like that, not bother anyone and have it that kind of space close by. So it's just a matter of what you want this community to look like, and that'll determine, what kind of housing we have.
I just was wondering, the Cortair was supposed to be a community of single-family homes.
Mm-hmm.
And that may have fit in more with our growth.
And this is Cortair you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes.
And they were talking about a school and a park and all this kind of thing, but it was going to be single-family homes. That was what it was. Yeah, that's what it was supposed to be. And then the city council had a meeting, and no matter what anybody said to them, they went ahead and made it multifamily units. And I think it's something like 440 acres worth of land. So again, they're building so fast, and you talk about revenue, but what's going to happen when we're building so fast that we don't have enough firemen, policemen, any of just the basics that we need. So the community said, no, we want it to stay single family, and it's not.
Well, first of all, it's your community, and people like myself who hold elected office, we should be listening to you. So I don't know the rationale behind why they changed, why they made a decision in one direction and then went to a different direction later. But I think it's important that elected officials can explain that, because when you understand the rationale for the decisions, quite often, especially the information that they have access to, I've found that most people tend to understand why I make the decisions I make. Were you going to say something else?
Yeah, a lot of us that it will affect are not, we're in the county, we're not in the city, so we can't even vote about it, but we can talk about it and say how it's going to affect us, because it's actually going further out into the county for
Yeah.
not enough roads and,
You
like I
know,
said, special services.
You bring up an excellent point, and this is something that I think we could talk about tonight. Jonathan, would you be able to put up the growth dashboard? This is something that Sarah and Jonathan really helped me with. I've already asked those questions or answered those. One of the things, for those of you who are not familiar with my background, I own a business. I have a business background, and primarily in marketing and finance. And one of the things that's really important to me when running a business is you have to get good information to understand what is happening within your business in order to make good decisions. And one of the things I discovered is that we don't have good information about how the county, the business of county, is operating. Are we too stressed? Are we not stressed enough? How well are we operating? And so I asked Jonathan and Sarah to help put together this growth dashboard. And what you'll see up here is each of these little rectangles is a different function within your county government. So if it's green, that means it's operating well. If it's yellow, that means it's getting stressed. And if it's red, that means it's getting overstressed. And what we did was we looked at national standards or industry standards for each of these different functions. So let's go to the Kootenai County Patrol up on the top there, right? So it's right in between the orange and the red. And what we looked at was the industry standard is about 1.5 patrol deputies per 1,000 county residents. Okay, right now we're at 1.04. So we're below an industry standard or national standard for law enforcement patrol officers per 1,000 residents. Now, this county is over 1,000 square miles. It's big. So one of the things that's important is that you want to make sure your backup isn't 45 minutes away. That plays a role in the quality of life and how proactive our law enforcement will be. So this tells us where we are, and we probably should be adding a few more deputy positions if we want to have 1.45 deputies per 1,000 residents. Jonathan, can you go to the jail, please? Now, that's clearly in the red. Like I mentioned, the legal capacity is at 361. The physical capacity is 451, and our current population as of the last update, and I believe it's monthly, is that correct? Yep, is 488 inmates. So we are beyond the physical capacity of our jail right now. That means we need to do something, and we are, fortunately. We're in the process of completing the expansion. Also, the ratio is 5 inmates per detention deputy, and we have 6.97, or right about 7 inmates per detention deputy. That also is an indicator that tells you that the danger level for our detention deputies is going up. Let's go over to prosecutor's office. Now, this one is interesting. For felony cases, the average number of cases per year per prosecutor is 150. We're at 197. For misdemeanor, the industry average is 400 per prosecutor per year. We're at 644. So we're stressing out our prosecutors. Now, who here wants to be soft on crime? Okay. Well, this is what happens. Let me explain to you, because I had this conversation with our prosecutor. When your prosecutors are, our prosecuting attorney, when your prosecutors are so overworked, you start to think about whether or not you're going to prosecute misdemeanors. Well, when you stop prosecuting misdemeanors, you actually increase the likelihood of more crime because there's no consequence for committing the smaller crimes. And usually criminals start small and work their way up. So that has a bad effect on a community if we're not prosecuting the misdemeanors. So this is a feedback loop for us to be able to make decisions. Now, where I'm going with this, as far as growth goes, because when it comes to saying yes to more growth, if our systems are that stressed out, we should probably be saying no today and maybe yes in the future once we get caught up. One of the things that we stopped doing as a board prior to me coming on as your county commissioner is that we stopped having meetings with our city mayors. Why? Most of the growth that is occurring in this county is occurring in the cities. They're annexing the county land, and they're increasing the density from 5-acre lots to much more intensive use like zero lot line single-family homes or apartment buildings. So this past month in the meeting with the mayors, I introduced this dashboard to them, and I asked, because they make their growth decisions often mutually exclusive of the service levels that the county is providing, if they would consider the county service levels in their growth decisions, because we oftentimes have to provide these services irrespective. And so at least we're starting that dialogue. Another place that I'd like to work with our city mayors on is developing a comp plan not only for the county, but having the cities develop their comp plans and linking them together so that we can actually have a community comp plan, which dictates the future growth within the county. I'd love to see those things happen. Now, what is the likelihood of them? It's going to be a challenge because you've got a number of different cities in the county, and getting everyone on board to do the same thing is a legitimate challenge. But we have to start having that conversation, and so we are. And so that growth dashboard really addresses the amount of growth that's going on in the county, and that includes the cities, and how it's stressing out our services. And this is available for you to see. It's on the homepage of the county website, kcgov.us. And you can see where we rate. Now, we do have, there Jonathan's just showing you. You want to go back to it? Now, here's something interesting that you probably are not aware of. Let's go to juvenile detention. That number is in the green. It's actually good. Our juvenile detention population has been going down. And the main reason for that is because there's been a shift in policy. We're actually looking for ways to have, to divert children out of the criminal justice system, because it really, we want kids to be on their best behavior, to be rehabilitated to some degree they can without it being inside the juvenile criminal justice system. And so this is a little bit of good news, and there's a reason behind it. Now, with that said, I will tell you that it wasn't long ago that we had our annual report on from juvenile detention, or actually juvenile probation. And the misdemeanor charges were going up, but the felony charges were going down. And I asked, well, how come the felony charges are going down if misdemeanor is going up? And what's happening right now is that the charges are being reduced. And I'm not so sure that that's a good thing, but that is what's happening in our community. So crime actually is going up, but serious crime is not, according to the numbers on the juvenile side, because in many cases, these situations are being reduced down. So you can glean information based upon what's happening in the different departments. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Does the county have any way to veto the city's annexations? Where I came from, there was a situation of the city's only annexing properties that was of value to them, tax bases, and then the county kind of loses businesses and ends up, not being, having a tax base left.
Well, the county has no say over the annexation. It's two willing parties, the city and the property owner. So if the property owner wants to be annexed and the city wants to annex, that will occur irrespective of what the county thinks. Believe it or not, there's situations where the county really wants properties to be annexed. If you look at different counties throughout the country, sometimes if you look at a map, you'll notice a little patchwork of county lots that are embedded within a city, and that land has never been annexed into the city. And we try to avoid that. And the main reason is those little lots that are embedded within a city, the county has to provide services to them, and the city doesn't.
And that's exactly what was happening, that the cities were annexing the profit centers.
Yes.
And then leaving everywhere else, that basically cost the county
Yes.
what would cost any entity the most money, and those were being left behind.
Yeah, and we want to try to avoid that in the long run because it puts additional stress on the county services, especially on fire. Well, not so much fire here, but certainly on the law enforcement side.
Yeah, and then, so I guess that's where the Kootenai County getting back to having a good working relationship with city governments.
It's essential. We're all in this together. We have to work together to solve these problems. So to me, engaging with the cities, talking with them, working with them is absolutely essential from a community perspective.
I see all your red boxes. And again, when you think of Cortair, they're talking about 10,000 more people. These are already stressed out.
Yes.
So what are we going to do with 10,000 more people?
Well, hopefully they'll come in very slowly in the future, and we can get caught up for that. But, we just released this web page or this dashboard within the last month and a half. So it really hasn't had much of time to really get out into the community to be looked at. But what's important is to make sure that the mayors and the city folks know about this, and hopefully they'll consider this. That's all we can ask, is that they'll hopefully consider it in their growth decisions. Another question. Oh, yes.
You know that I'm running for county commissioner for District 1. I'm not trying to get you on a gotcha question or anything, but the planning and the severe lack of planning that's going on. We've got the jail expansion that's being completed, the Justice Center that's being completed, the coroner's hollering for more room. Is there any indication from your other board members that they're willing to start looking in the future? Where are we going to put the next courtroom and so on and so forth?
That's a good question. And that's one of the things about planning that has not been occurring enough in the past. And this is one of the reasons that I want to have these kind of town halls and engage the community to let you know what's going on in your community. If we're not planning for this kind of growth from a service level perspective, then how are we going to be able to deliver those service levels? And, it's something that just has to be done. It hasn't been done like it should be. But I think one of the challenges, too, is the fact that the nature of this position, the county commissioner, is that we're in office, it alternates between 4 and 2-year terms. But we're talking about 10, 15, 20-year planning. So it's very difficult to be talking like that when your term ends. And oftentimes we find ourselves where people just kick the can down the road and they say, well, we'll get to it when we get to it. And quite frankly, let's be honest, we wouldn't be $32 trillion in debt because of the current Congress. We're $32 trillion in debt because of all the Congresses before the current Congress. And it's been going on for decades. But to me, I think the most important thing is that you as the citizens need to know what's going on in your community. The citizens will drive the long-term planning if they demand that from their elected officials. Yes.
Another question, what are a majority of the crimes that are committed is Phil in the jail?
Most of it is drug-related, theft, things like that. Fortunately, we don't live in a community where you have to worry about being robbed at gunpoint or anything like that. But most of the people in our jail are there because of affliction. It is a huge problem in this community like it is in other parts of the country. And sadly, we try to do everything that we can. I think one of the biggest things that can be done is to go as upstream as we possibly can and get to kids before affliction gets to them. The cost to help get someone off drugs is exorbitant compared to prevention. But that's what is driving most of the crime in this community. Any other questions? I got a couple more. The gentleman in the back there.
The areas that are in the red, could they have been prevented from the last 5 years in the sitting commissioners? I know you're new to this, but the last previous 3, could it have been avoided?
I think a lot of things could have been avoided. One of the reasons for putting this dashboard together is because now we're all looking at the same information. Sometimes I think it's hard to see the consequences of kicking the can down the road, of just saying, well, we'll give you a raise, but it may not be enough to actually fix the problem, but we did something. And I think that that's one of the challenges. But with this dashboard, I think it's a lot harder to ignore what's going on. And now that we can see it, we can start to say what needs to be done to fix this. I prefer that when an elected official needs money, that they give me a dollar amount that they need to fix the problem, and then we can work from there, as opposed to if the market pay is $20 and we're paying $13 an hour, don't ask for 16, because 16 is not going to fix your problem. It's just going to keep the people who are getting paid $13 an hour there a little bit longer, and they're going to get paid $16 an hour. We need to start fixing these problems so we can move on to other problems, as opposed to constantly readdressing the same issues. Next question here. We need more funding for law enforcement since the feds and state are not doing enough. As per Sheriff's Office, the property owners are not the ones breaking the law, so it seems unfair to raise property taxes for that. I like the idea of a county resort fee, perhaps increasing fines for lawbreakers. The fines, I think, are issued by the judges. We don't really have anything to do with that. But I do agree, and that's one of the things, is to figure out a way to generate revenue by those who visit this community because they draw services too. And I don't believe that the homeowner, the property owner, should be forced to have to subsidize this service. State law requires us to provide it, but it doesn't mean that we have to be the ones largely responsible for paying for it. Thank you, Nadine. Thank you. Sarah, did you want to tally some of these? Oh, you did? Okay, where did you give that to me? Oh, right here, all right. Where do you stand on splitting the 10 acres to 5 acres with family? Let me explain to you what this family exemption is. We have a system in place for growth, and that system requires that if you want to subdivide your land, you have to, for all intents and purposes, jump through a few hoops. This family exemption, which is before the board now, would help bypass parents and people who own land to subdivide the land and give it to their kids and direct relatives. So that's what we're looking at. And like I said, the devil is in the details, and we should have a answer on that within the next 2 weeks. So until then, I can't really talk too much about it, but after we make our decision, I'd be happy to talk about it as much as anyone wants to listen. Another question is, I recently witnessed an accident involving an ATV versus a Subaru. Well, I think I know who won that one. On Highway 41, near mile marker 16 outside Spirit Lake. Locals are aware of the recreational traffic. However, visitors are not. How can I submit recommendations for ATV crossing, signs, or who makes this happen? Highway districts. Oh, I believe that's the highway districts. Yep. That's a good question. Make sure that before you leave here, you leave your name and email address, and we'll find out the answer for you and make sure you know. But I think you probably would definitely want to call. It's really a matter of finding the right person. But let's see what we can do. One of the good things about living in North Idaho is that we're very decentralized. One of the not so good things or challenging things about living in North Idaho is that we're very decentralized. And, as much as I'd love to be able to say I could help you with that problem, because we're so decentralized, the highway districts, which are their own taxing districts, they manage that. So good question, though. I hope the person on the ATV made it out okay. To put budget into perspective, can you compare the county budget to the total budget of public schools in the county? I believe the Coeur d'Alene number 271 district budget is approximately $97 million per year. I don't know what the Coeur d'Alene school budget is. Ours is about 110, not including solid waste. Coeur d'Alene's budget is right around there. It's pretty big. So from a county perspective, we're doing pretty good. Compared to the cities typically have more services to offer, and so that's why their tax rate is very high too. But I'm sorry I can't answer on the Coeur d'Alene school. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned earlier comparing the Coeur d'Alene Police Department and the sheriff's deputies, and now they have their raise. How is that equalized?
We gave our deputies a raise to 3% behind. 3% behind Coeur d'Alene's. No one is being enriched here. We're just trying to stay competitive. And our jail deputies are 8% behind our patrol deputies. So the patrol deputies are 3% behind Coeur d'Alene. The jail deputies are 8% behind patrol. And that's how we determine their pay. Because we figure if you're going to be a Kootenai County Sheriff's deputy and you're looking to leave, you're not looking to move out of the area. You're looking for another agency within the area that you can go to. So, any other questions? All right, well, on to the survey results. First of all, thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank you for those who completed the survey. How familiar are you with the job duties of a county commissioner? One is none, and 5 is substantial. How many people do you think said 5 in this room? None. That is correct. So hopefully tonight when you walk out, you know a little bit more about what your county commissioners do. 5 people said number 4, 3 people said number 3, 5 people said number 2, and 6 said none. They had no idea what their county commissioner does. Your county commissioner position is so important. They're really the arbiter, the decision maker for anything and everything financial as well as policies. You want good policy in your county. Good policy reduces liability. It's a big deal. So you want people who can think clearly, have good experience on policy, have experience with managing money, budgets, understand how cash flow works, how expenses work, the timing of them, it can make a big difference in your community. So the county commissioner job is very important in that sense. Do you believe Kootenai County is growing too fast? All right, there's two people in here. There's two people who don't think it is. I want to talk with you afterwards, okay? 15 of you said, yes, it is. And I tend to agree with you. It's growing just a little too fast, you know? And so that's what I'm doing with the growth dashboard. That's why I'm engaging the cities. We are redoing our comp plan. We just approved money to conduct a community survey. Every comp plan, which is required by statute, must be done between, I think, every 10 to 15 years roughly, must begin with survey data from the community, because you within the community drive what we're supposed to look like in the coming next decade. So, you know what's been done in the past? Someone told me this. They went around the county and held little events like this and just listened to people and said, okay, that's the survey and that's going to drive the comp plan. That is not scientific. You could invite all your builder friends to show up and say, yeah, we really want more building. A scientific survey is something that can withstand legal scrutiny and is statistically valid. So we're actually performing a statistically valid survey this summer to hear from you what you want to see this community look like. And that drives the rest of the comp plan. So I suspect that the survey is going to come back very similar to this. About 15 out of 17 people say it's growing too fast. Next question. Are you familiar with the Kootenai County Growth Dashboard? Well, I know the answer to that question now, but beforehand, it was 16-3. So 16 people, roughly little over 80% were not familiar with it. So check it out when you get home. What is your opinion of local government? Well, I'm glad to hear positive 8, neutral 5, and negative is 2. For those two people, I hope it's not the same two people that think we're not growing fast enough, okay? But if you're around here tonight, I'd love to talk with you and understand why your opinion is negative of local government. You know, part of the reason that I ran for county commissioner is because you have a bigger say at the local level. You know, all politics is local. At the national level, it's impossible to have a say. At the state level, it's not impossible, but it's harder. But at the local level, you have a real say. And, you know, you can make a big difference in your community. And that's what drove me to at least become your county commissioner. Are you aware that our airport has commercial flights? That's about 50-50. 10 said no, 9 said yes. I can assure you it's not scheduled commercial. At best, it's charter today, and I don't ever see scheduled commercial happening. What percentage of your property tax bill do you think goes to Kootenai County? Now, this is interesting. No one said 75 to 100%. Did you have something you wanted to say, Sarah? Oh, okay. Yeah. No one said 75 to 100%, so that's good. 50 to 75%. We had 5 people think that. 30 to 50%, 3 people, and 0 to 30%, 7 people. You know, one of the challenges, and I'm just going to say it, is that when you get your tax bill, a lot of times people think that the Board of County Commissioners is responsible for that entire tax bill. We're not. We're just responsible for collecting the money, which is why you get a bill from the county. The county taxes largely comprise somewhere between 25 and 30%, roughly, of your entire tax bill. We have nothing to do with the other taxing jurisdictions. My fire district increased their taxes, I think, over 10% one year. And one of the people who ran for the board, he said that he showed up to a meeting and no one else shows up. And so they increased taxes and no one's there to contest it. And so, again, I go back to one of the great things about living in North Idaho is that we have a very decentralized government. And one of the not so great things is it's decentralized, which means you as a citizen have to show up to all these different meetings to voice your concerns about these tax bills that you get. Because even I, every year, when I look at my tax bill, kind of go, why did this go up so much sometimes? So it's a very small percent. We have the city of Coeur d'Alene here. It's just a, what kind of tax bill is this? Just a $580,000 home. And the county taxes are $711 out of $3,000. So it equals about 23% of the overall tax bill. What's surprising is that the city is $1,200, and that accounts for about 41% of your tax bill if you live in the city of Coeur d'Alene. Let's look at another city, Post Falls. There, the county tax share is about 20%, so it's less. Post Falls, $1,154, 34%. I think it's less than Coeur d'Alene, but it's probably the fire district that they're paying for, because I think Coeur d'Alene has their own fire department. So the fire district is 16%. That is an expensive proposition to provide fire service. The equipment that they have to buy now is $500,000 at a minimum, sometimes closer to $1 million. It's amazing how much it costs. You want to go to another one? Rathdrum, $681. So the county portion of that tax bill, and that's for a $555,000 home, is about 20%. Our city of Rathdrum, $1,137. So it just gives you a sense of the world as to where your county taxes fall in the scheme of things. And we really try to do our best to keep it low. Is there another one? Unincorporated county. How many people live in the county who are in this room? I live in the county. I mean, we all live in the county, but not in a city. $716 for a $579,000 home out of a $2,281 tax bill. That means about 30.3% of your tax bill is comprised of county taxes. Next biggest, school districts, and then fire district with 12%. School district is 29%, fire district is 12%. And you had one more slide there. And this is basically our property tax rate per $100,000 of Kootenai County compared to some of the other larger counties in the state. Now, there's a couple of things you can take from this. The first one is that our tax rate is lower than most of the other state, and that's actually a good thing. But we also have to recognize that part of the reason we have some of those departments in red is because we haven't been properly funding them. And so that is one of the goals, is to try to get them properly funded, but keep our tax rate lower than these other counties and the state as a whole. And that's one of the challenges as a county commissioner. Any questions? All right. Priorities, first to last. Properly fund law enforcement. Head and shoulders, number one. Number two, keeping taxes low. All right, you guys are going to need to help me on how we're going to properly fund law enforcement and keep our taxes low. Number three, slowing growth. Well, slowing growth will slow the growth rate of your taxes. Like we already discussed tonight, growth does not pay for itself in this community. And so if you want to keep your taxes lower, you have to put some sort of way to manage growth properly. Slow and steady is good. Fast growth will overwhelm our systems. We won't be able to build the infrastructure fast enough. Number four, improve county services. And we're always trying to find ways to do that, whether it's by having better qualified people interfacing with you or using technology to make your life easier interfacing with us. And number five, other, illegal immigration. And number six, Developers pay for growth. Well, believe me, we're all on the same page with that. Would you like to see more engagement from your county elected officials on subjects like this? Who in here said no? I'm just kidding. Everyone said yes. Thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate that. I will take any other questions, and if you have no questions, we can call it an evening. Anyone have any questions? One question.
You mentioned earlier that there's some high-profile people that live in this county.
Yes.
Have you ever thought about trying to convince them to donate to open space?
You know, we've talked about it. Now, when I say we, myself and people outside of government, I don't think it's right for government to ask people, will you give us land? But I do think it would be appropriate to find ways where it would make sense for people to either sell it to us at a reduced rate. But as far as gifting it, I don't think that I haven't had that conversation specifically.
I'm not thinking in terms of gifting land. I'm saying, my guess is a lot of these, at least from what I hear, high-profile people aren't big landowners. They're people that got a lot of money.
Oh, well, okay, that's true. And they're not necessarily the larger landowners. The larger landowners in this community are the families that have been here for many generations. They started off as farming, and so they still have large holdings within the community. I'd love to find a way where we could work with them and find a way where we could, purchase land, perhaps at a reduced rate, but offer something in exchange, or offer some sort of a tax incentive for a period of time, something where we could preserve some of those open spaces. I don't know about you, but when I drive down the prairie, I really like the fact that it's open and you can see the mountains in the distance. What always surprises me, and I saw this where I came from back east, is that when I would drive across the prairie, I would notice a new tract home development or apartment complex and say, whoa, when did that get built? And it's a surprise. And sadly, the new cash crop in this area is tract housing. And so if we can do anything to preserve some open space, I think it would be prudent and beneficial in the long run. Good question. Any other questions? Thank you all very much for coming out. I really appreciate it.